Fortnite is dying, and it's not a guess, it's a fact. A couple of days ago, Epic Games released a statement, and in that statement, they announced they were laying off over 1,000 employees, 1/3 of their workforce, all at once. Over 1,000 people without a job overnight, and all of this because of the decline of a game that, in 2018, was the biggest phenomenon on the planet. It's not just that. The most striking thing about the statement wasn't the number of layoffs. It was the sentence CEO Tim Sweeney wrote to justify it. I quote, "We are spending much more than we are bringing in." That's what the chief executive officer of the massive company that makes Fortnite said, the free-to-play game that has generated billions and billions of dollars in revenue throughout all of these successful years. And if we add to this the news that a few days ago they were gonna increase the price of V-Bucks, Fortnite's virtual currency, and that they would now cost more, you can get an idea of how the situation is right now. But how did they get to this point? What exactly happened? That's what we're gonna discuss in this video. And for some context, we have to remember what Fortnite has been, because this game came out in 2017, and the Battle Royale mode arrived as a last-minute experiment. In fact, the main mode was originally Save the World, and this specific Battle Royale mode they ended up adding later on was actually just a small test mode they put in for free so that more people would then be encouraged to buy the full premium Save the World product. Well, in a matter of months, it became the most played game in the world. And it's truly not an exaggeration. In 2018, Fortnite had over 350 million registered accounts and reached over 78 million active players in a single month. And Fortnite was absolutely everywhere, in school recesses, in viral memes, and even in the goal celebrations of professional soccer players. Highly prestigious artists like Drake ended up playing live, for example, with Ninja. Travis Scott began performing in a concert which was attended by a massive crowd of 12 million people simultaneously. And Fortnite isn't just a video game, it's a cultural phenomenon. This was Fortnite until a moment came when the tide began to turn. But when did that happen? When did everything start to break? The problem with Fortnite hasn't been that it suddenly became bad. The problem has been that the world has changed and Fortnite hasn't known how to change with it. For many years, Epic has bet on expanding the game in every possible direction. Instead of just being a battle royale, they've ended up creating an ecosystem where everyone wants to collaborate in Fortnite. They want to put in their identity, their skin, their product. Fortnite stopped being just a game and ended up becoming a showcase, a platform where, besides, when they added creative mode, people started creating their own games there. Something similar to what happens in Roblox. And if you haven't seen the video where we talk about the history of Roblox, I recommend you watch it, because there we explain how people can create experiences in that game while earning money. And that's exactly what's happening in Fortnite. There are people creating games inside Fortnite, earning an absolute ton of money. And the problem with this in Fortnite is that none of these modes have worked well enough to end up justifying their existence. Yesterday, along with the announcement of all these layoffs, Epic Games ended up confirming that it's closing 3 of these new modes. Ballistic and Festival Battle disappear on April 16th, and Rocket Racing will disappear in October. I quote, "We failed in trying to do something sufficiently surprising," they ended up saying. And it's a brutal phrase to come out of the mouth of a company that's been telling you for years that its game is the future of entertainment, that its game is already living in the metaverse, where there are so many collaborations, so many outfits. It's wild that they end up saying this, but this is what ends up summarizing everything. This fact I'm going to tell you, because a few days ago, the consulting firm Newzoo, and the data they ended up releasing is that Fortnite ended up dropping 29% in playtime throughout all of 2025. It's not that they lost players all at once, but rather they've been losing them little by little, hour by hour, match by match, kill by kill, mode by mode. And while Fortnite continued to lose players, Epic Games' expenses didn't stop growing. More game modes, more collaborations, whether it's Marvel, Star Wars, or Avatar, more infrastructure, more servers, more staff, more updates, until it reached the point where these expenses started to exceed the amount of revenue. And that, in any company in the world, only has one possible end: bankruptcy. Within that official statement, Tim Sweeney ended up pointing the finger at several different factors: the global economic crisis, the significant decline in home console sales, and the growing competition. And yes, all of this is real. But Sweeney also acknowledged something that I think is important to highlight. I quote, "Some of Epic's problems are unique to the company." And that's exactly what I'm interested in analyzing. Because there are external factors for Epic that it can't control, but there are internal decisions that do end up explaining this disaster. First cause, the business models started to become aggressive. And just a few weeks ago, Epic Games ended up raising the price of V-Bucks, the game's virtual currency. Basically, battle passes now end up giving you fewer coins. They started selling skins at exorbitant prices. They're outfits that end up costing you $22 when the indie game the character is based on costs $8 on Steam. The community started tearing into this, calling it the enshittification of Fortnite, always making memes about how many games will end up being the Fortnication of, for example, Call of Duty. And when a community starts using that word to describe your game, it's something quite negative, I dare to say. It's very clear that the community doesn't want that. What happened with V-Bucks recently is that they also ended up raising the price. Now, if you want to buy the same amount of V-Bucks, you have to end up buying several packs that have also increased in price because they've given you packs where if you want to buy a specific skin, the basic pack isn't enough. They force you to buy 2 packs, making them a full 47% more expensive than they were before. There's a video by Hyper that describes it really well, and the dirty trick they're pulling is just outrageous. And on top of that, to try and cover this up, they'd offered triple creator code earnings to try and get creators to encourage people to buy V-Bucks. Obviously, the Fortnite community has exploded and everyone is saying, well, don't buy V-Bucks in the game, obviously, because it's a bit of a scam. And now you can end up buying, well, with the same amount of money, you can end up buying fewer skins. Second cause we can attribute to this debacle, years without being on mobile. Because Epic Games has been in a legal battle for several years against Apple and Google over the commissions they charge in their app stores. If you don't know, whenever you make a purchase through Google or Apple, depending on whether you have an iPhone or an Android, these stores always end up charging you a commission for using their platform. And it's a fair battle to try and argue this, but the practical result has been that Fortnite ended up disappearing from the App Store and Google Play for several years. Years without being able to attract younger players who play mainly on mobile, and now they're slowly coming back, but obviously the damage is already done. Third cause, too much expansion, not enough depth. Because Epic Games tried to make Fortnite everything at once. Battle Royale, creative platform, concerts, racing, shooters, story mode. And it's hard to try everything and not lose that essence. If players want a tactical shooter, well, obviously they go to Valorant. If they want something arcade, they can end up going to Call of Duty. Those who wanted Battle Royale started looking elsewhere. The game's identity slowly ended up being diluted, and the result is what we're seeing now, over 1,000 layoffs and 3 confirmed modes that are gonna end up closing. But there's something important we can't ignore, and that's that Fortnite isn't the only one in these circumstances. In recent years, the video game industry has lost tens of thousands of jobs. For instance, Microsoft has just ended up laying off more than 1,900 people from its gaming studios. EA has also laid off 670. We already know Sony is very famous for ending up closing several studios they end up making, and now Epic Games is joining them. Why is this happening? Well, because the industry also experienced a bubble during these last few years of the pandemic. When everyone was completely locked in at home, all video games ended up exploding. Companies were hiring at full speed, expanding projects, investing in everything. And as the world has gradually returned to normal, people have gone back out, and players have slowly been reducing their screen time. It's also similar to what ended up happening with Netflix, which during the pandemic years, well, they set records, and little by little after that, the company slowly declined. And here's where the catastrophe comes in, because an industry analyst has summarized all this in a brutal way. Hearing this news from Epic, you end up thinking, if the most played game in the world on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC is in these circumstances, what are the chances for the rest of the games as a service? Well, of course, it's a question that doesn't end up having a very comfortable answer. It's obvious that Fortnite isn't dead. Let that be perfectly clear. It's still the most played game in the world today. It continues to generate billions of dollars. It even has Disney, which ended up putting in $1,500 million in investment to be able to partner up. Of course it's not dead. Now it is indeed wounded. And these layoffs reveal not just the situation of one game in particular, but they also end up revealing how the industry is functioning today. It's one of the problems these free-to-play services end up having, these models based on constant player retention, which is that they need to keep growing constantly to survive. They can't stay stable if they don't have that flow of players. If they don't end up growing, then obviously they go into losses. It's a model that works like crazy when everything's going well, but it becomes a trap when players slowly start to decline. Fortnite is the game that ended up revolutionizing the industry. It's the game that, for a long time, everyone wanted to be like, that everyone wanted to be a part of. Fortnite. And now it has to prove if it knows how to be the biggest game in the world for even longer, which is something very difficult. I don't think Fortnite will end up dying because in the end, it's a massive phenomenon. I think it's been the best video game and the most important video game of the last decade for sure. But it is true that they have to end up adapting their business and their game to try to plug the holes and the problems they're facing today. In the comments, I'd like to know your opinion. What do you think of Fortnite? Do you think it'll end up being saved? Do you think it could end up falling? I still can't believe it, but it's clear they need to try something different.